Welcome to this Fundamentals Lesson Plan series on rendering. In this video, we'll take a look at exporting the Revit model to the FBX file format. This is video 2 of 4. My name is John Harridge, and I'll be your host for today's lesson. Let's review the learning objectives for video 2. At the end of this lesson, you'll be able to export a Revit model to the FBX file format, and then the second item is to import that same FBX file into Autodesk 3ds Max Design. With that, let's get started. Let's begin the exercise by opening up an existing Revit project file. So go ahead and click Open and then navigate to your tutorial folder. And let's open up the file Visualization Rendering Exercise 2. Continuing on from exercise 1, we will explore 2 workflows for importing an FBX file format into Autodesk 3ds Max Design. So let's get into the first workflow. Go to your Revit menu application button. Go ahead and select Export, and then select the FBX option. Next, we'll perform a save file. Go ahead and give it the name. I'm going to change the file name to make it a little bit simpler. You're welcome to do likewise. Just confirming that the file format type is set to the FBX format. And up at the top, also confirm that the directory that you're saving to is your tutorial directory. If all the above is correct, go ahead and click Save to continue. If you do not have Autodesk 3ds Max Design, this concludes this exercise. If you do have Autodesk 3ds Max Design, we will continue the workflow importing the FBX file format into 3ds Max Design. So if you would, go ahead and pause here, open up 3ds Max Design, and let's continue on. Now with Autodesk 3ds Max Design open, let's go to the application menu, select Import, and we're going to use the first option to bring in non-native file formats. Again, we'll need to set the file type to FBX at the bottom of the dialog box, and then browse out to your tutorial folder. And let's bring in the FBX file that you saved just a moment ago. And go ahead and click Open to continue. Next appears a settings dialog box. 3ds Max Design comes by default with Revit settings, so let's go ahead and accept those defaults as is. Go ahead and click OK to continue. If you receive a warning message about a camera offset not being OK, let's go ahead and click OK to dismiss the dialog box. So using the middle mouse button, I can pan the model that came from the FBX file format, and if you want to, go ahead and use the view cube to orbit the model. Alternatively, you can use the Alt key plus the middle mouse button and dragging technique to also orbit the model. Let's go ahead and save the file. And browse out to your tutorial folder. And let's give it the name Visual Rendering Exercise 2 with the .max for the Max Design file format. Note that when we brought the FBX file format in, it brought in all of the Revit model elements, including the camera and the sun settings. This concludes this exercise for workflow 1. In the next clip, we'll look at workflow 2. Okay, starting workflow 2, back in Revit, we will begin the second workflow. So going to the Revit application menu, this time we'll go to the Suites workflow command and choose 3ds Max Design for exterior rendering. Let's take a peek at the settings dialog box. Here you can better understand what the default assumptions are going into this process. Note that the materials will be captured, but if you apply materials in 3ds Max Design, they will stick, if you will. So on a round trip between Revit and 3ds Max, the 3ds Max materials will stick. Let's choose Close to dismiss the dialog box, and let's start the process again. Returning back to the Revit application menu, let's go back to Suite Workflows, choose Exterior Rendering. Let's click on Settings once again. Again, we won't make any changes here. Let's go ahead and select Run in the lower right-hand corner. Again, these are some additional settings that may be of interest to you. Go ahead and click Continue to dismiss the dialog box. Revit is now transferring the model to 3ds Max Design. Again, it's capturing the model, geometry, the cameras, the sun. It's automatically opening 3ds Max for me. I'll go ahead and close out the introduction screen. And here's the model from Revit. And I'm just using the Alt key plus the middle mouse button drag to orbit the model. Note that the sun came in, and also the 3D view camera that was established in Revit, along with the model geometry. Let's go ahead and save the file, give it a name. Be visualization rendering exercise 02. And click Save after you give it a name. With that, let's take a more in-depth look at what's happening behind the scenes in 3ds Max Design. As an instructor demo, I'd like to explore further the following topics in 3ds Max Design. One is Scene Explorer, just to confirm that the model assets captured from Revit actually transferred across. Second, we'll look at applying the Revit materials to the scene view. Third, we'll take a look at making the Revit camera the active view. And fourth, we'll take a look at rendering and doing 2 quick iterations. So let's move on to looking at the materials that came across. If we go to the Tools pull down and choose New Scene Explorer, let me resize the dialog box here so we can get it stacked above the model. And just note in the left window, you'll start to see some things that are hopefully familiar to you from Revit. So basically calling out the wall types and then confirming that with the Revit category column. It tells you it's a wall. And then if I expand out the right side of the dialog box here, we should be able to again see the specific element type that's being referenced. So it's the brick on metal stud wall type. All right, let's go back to the second line here. Also note that it's captured the materials and it's activated. If I left click on the roof asset in that window, it highlights the equivalent object in the model. And then if I turn off its visibility state, now I can see inside the model. All right, I'll turn that back on. Let's just scroll through the list to see what other assets came across. All right, we're getting the interior walls. Now we know what their wall types are. Here's the doors. And just below that are the windows. And some more interior doors. All right, scrolling back up to the top. I do want to call out the numbers at the end of those assets. Those are Revit ID numbers. So if you wanted to trace that particular object back inside Revit, you could actually call up that ID number and it'd actually highlight that object for you in the Revit model. So that's a good thing to know just in case you need to track down a specific asset. All right, so next I'd like to look at applying the materials from Revit to the current scene. So let me go to the Views pull-down menu and let's choose Show Materials in Viewport As, and we'll select Shaded Materials with Maps. Okay, so once again this confirms that the material assignments created in Revit did transfer. I didn't have to repopulate that in 3ds Max. So that looks pretty good. Next, I'd like to make the Revit camera the active view in 3ds Max. So if I go to the perspective button in the viewport, I can click on cameras, and that's the 3D view camera that was created in Revit that came across. All right, so I'm looking very closely at the roof. That's not what I had in mind when I saw it in Revit, so let's see how we can correct that. If I go back to the 3D view button for the viewport, we can actually select the camera object in 3ds Max and make some corrections. So going over to the Modify panel, just confirming that we have the camera object selected, and scrolling down a little further, there's some parameters that we can modify to hopefully make this look better. So there's a lens type, a field of view. I like the idea of working with camera lens analogy. So let's try the 35mm lens. Okay, it's a little further out. Let's jump over to the 15mm. It's still not enough. I think the easiest thing to do is go ahead and modify the field of view. So if I swipe that value and then put my cursor on the arrow button to the right there and drag upwards, I can actually scroll back out, so to speak. That looks pretty good. If you want to work with precision, you could also type in a value. Much better. And the only thing that's nagging me on screen is the grid, so I'll type in G as the grid shortcut key toggle. All right, let's move on to a quick render intro in 3ds Max Design. Let me go ahead and set up the environment here. Let me go back to the perspective view. And I'll orbit the model so I can see it from the southwest orientation, so to speak. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. All right. I think before I do that, I'll actually go into the selector and actually make a change to the sun properties. So I'm scrolling the asset list and I'm going to select the sun asset that came from Revit and click OK to put it in a selection set. And then from the modify panel, you'll see that there's some parameters that we can adjust. In the position section, let's go ahead and set it to date, time, and location. And then I'll click setup so I can do this visually. So I'll begin the workflow by setting the location. And again, you could pick anywhere on the map, or you can pick a city from the list. Whatever your preference is, I'll click OK to continue. Next, I'll adjust the time of day and also time of year through the month field. So I'll keep adjusting this until I get the sun angle that I'm looking for. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. All right, going back over to the canvas here, I'll accept those changes, and now we'll take a look at the rendering setups. So going to the rendering tab, I'll click on render setup. I'm going to just focus on the common tab for this demonstration. I just want to do a single render, and I want to render the entire view, but you could do a subset of that. I'll scroll down a little further. Notice that there's all kinds of options. I have advanced lighting turned on. That's okay. The most important thing is getting your render assignment configured. So I'm going to accept the defaults, and this is where maybe my screen looks different than yours because I'm using an NVIDIA card in my machine. I'm going to go ahead and set the presets. I'm going to use daylighting for mental ray. For this particular demonstration, I'll go ahead and load in those presets. So with that change made, I'm actually going to proceed with generating the render. So go ahead and click on that, and it's working on that task. And again, depending on how much working RAM you have, this can go really quick, or it could take a little longer. All right, so it finished up. Not too bad, but I noticed that the scene is fairly dark, so there's a way to correct that. Let me go ahead and clone the view, and in the second instance I will make some adjustments for this. So in the dialog box up above, I'll click on the exposure control, and I'll stick with the environment tab here. Let me scroll down. I'm looking for the exposure controls. Just making sure that photograph light is used. And then I'll scroll down a little further to the specific photographic controls. All right, so if you have some familiarity with photography, these three fields should look familiar to you. You've got the speed, you have the aperture, and you have the ISO speed of the film. So what I really want to do is just modify the shutter to make it a longer duration to get more light into the image. So I'm making that longer. I'll go ahead and reuse the geometry and final gathering to help improve with the performance of the render. And let me re-render that same scene. And right away I can tell that the scene has gotten much brighter. And so it's not uncommon to go through these kinds of iterative processes as you start to get familiar with these tools. So feel free to experiment and explore to get the right output that you're seeking to showcase your design. All right, that's wrapping up. Let me slide this second rendering over so you can compare the two side by side, and I think you'll agree with me that the initial one was fairly dark and the second one is lighter. It's getting closer to the results that I'm looking for. This concludes this instructor demo. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Let's go ahead and take a look at next steps. Let's review the learning objectives for video 2. In this lesson, you were able to export a 3D Revit model view to the FBX file format, and then we wrapped up by importing that same FBX file into Autodesk 3ds Max Design. With that, let's take a look at Autodesk resources that are available to you. I would like to make you aware of two Autodesk resources. The first resource is the Autodesk Education Community, where you can access free software for both students and educators for titles like Autodesk Revit featured in this series. The website address is www.students.autodesk.com. Registration is required to access the free software using either your personal email address or your school-issued email address. The second resource is the Autodesk Digital STEAM Workshop. It's hands-on, project-based learning across multiple industries such as architecture, engineering, and entertainment. The website address is www.digitalsteam.autodesk.com. Registration is required to download the free learning resources using your Autodesk ID created from the Autodesk Education Community. You will find the Fundamentals of Architecture series under the Subject pull-down menu, Architecture link. Assets include step-by-step instructions, datasets, and videos. This concludes this lesson overview summary. Thank you for watching.